like to say a few words why this content or this element of the GlobSec, which is new one, which is GlobSec Future, why this is introduced this year. And this is because security has been changing, it has been evolving. It's not security as we used to know it, the hard security, the tanks, the guns. It is now a new security. Security which includes economic aspects, which includes IT, includes terrorism in its different forms, unfortunately some of them which we saw recently in Manchester. So it's a security which is unfortunately much closer to people and which has much broader dimension. That's why GlobSec Future is supposed to focus on those new dimensions of security and to give us opportunity to different stakeholders from governments, private sector, from civil society, to talk about how we understand security in this new context, but also how we deal with the new challenges that such a new security and security component is creating. Now, this discussion is about so-called navigating the fourth industrial revolution. When I was Minister of Economy in Slovakia, this was one of the key issues we were trying to capture, understand, and also try to act on what does so-called industry number 4, 4.0, what does it mean for countries like Slovakia? And this is very much like Europe. It's an open economy very much dependent on exports, on its ability to be competitive in the global environment, which basically Europe as such is very much the same. Open economy, the biggest trading nation and region in the world, struggling for keeping its competitive position in the global environment. So we were trying to look at Industry 4.0 as an opportunity, because there are, of course, threats which emanate from industrialization. It is the question about the future of workers. Are they going to be replaced by robots? What does it mean in terms of ability of nations to capture innovation and to drive the process of innovation, use it for its own development? From our point of view, our countries and Europe needs to focus on Industry 4.0 as an opportunity to utilize what Europe and this region of Central Eastern Europe has been always best about. It was not about natural resources, it was not about cheap labor force, it was about the ability of people to think and to develop new ideas. I was today, this morning, which actually was before the GlobSec officially began, there was a discussion about how do we support new innovative companies from Central Europe, from countries like Slovakia, companies which grew up, started in this environment. We have some successful stories like Asset, but also new ones. Aeromobile, I think, know quite many people, although we haven't flown yet the flying car, but hopefully soon we will do. But also companies like GA Drilling, which has an innovative way of a very deep drilling, which could bring completely new way for example, for oil and gas companies to define new ways of getting their sources. So there are these companies which started here. They received support in private capital or governments in terms of startups, but we still have a market gap in its ability to develop scale-up companies. So-called growth equity is lacking. This is one of the market gaps. We are, I think, quite good already in Europe, helping companies to be created, to start, to be nurtured. But then most of these innovative companies leave for the United States, for Silicon Valley, or they are bought up by Chinese, although maybe there are some Chinese friends here and we are welcome, or Korean, or whatever. Anyway, we would like to keep as many of these companies European as possible. And this is one of those areas where we need to do much more. And this is also an area where, for example, European Investment Bank is now developing a new program exactly for the support of the so-called growth equity, to provide more equity capital to the private equity funds and companies throughout the Central Eastern Europe and Europe as such, to be able to promote such startups and to help them to become scale-ups and eventually be listed and companies which can generate profits. So this is one element of of what we would call industrial revolution. It means how do we capture innovation, how do we nurture it, how do we make it part of our daily life, and how do we make sure that it benefits people. I think my colleague, Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič, will talk much more about smart city concept, which we are developing together with the European Commission, and which is also, I think, an interesting way how we bring innovation into kind of territorial level and make sure that cities are also the drivers of innovation itself. I want to talk much more than that because I'm sure there will be more opportunities to do it during the panel discussion, and usually when I'm in the audience, this is the part which I'm looking forward to have more exchange of discussion ideas, and that's why I think we should have more space for our panelists to speak and to have discussion with the audience. That's why maybe my last role would be to ask Simon Nixon, who is going to moderate this discussion, to come here and to take over the role of the leader of the panel itself. But thank you again for coming here and for being part of this discussion and panel.
Thank you, Vasil. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the panel discussion. Vasil's introduced the topic. I'll introduce the panel. Sitting on my left, we have Philippa Malmgren, who is a former advisor to the President of the United States in the second Bush administration. That's, well, the 43rd, President 43. But relevantly for this panel, well, she's a founder of a consultancy, economics consultancy, DRPM Group, and also a founder of a robotics company, H Robotics. Sitting next to her, we have Maroš Šefčovič, who is the Vice President of the European Union, one of the Vice Presidents of the European Union, and responsible particularly for the Energy Union. Rosen Plevnev, the former President of Bulgaria, but also, again, from the perspective of this panel, a engineer and a entrepreneur, founder of a number of technology companies, but also, he tells me, has a diploma in artificial intelligence. So very far-sighted interest in the fourth industrial revolution before any of us, the rest of us, had even thought about it. And then Vasil Hudak, who you've just heard from, and then finally on the left, Martina Larkin, who is the head of the Europe and Eurasia and sits on the executive committee for the World Economic Forum. So if we could just dive straight in on the panel. I mean, first I'd like to ask people on the panel what it is about the fourth industrial revolution that most excites them, or the changes that they personally think are the most transformative, the most interesting from their perspective. Perhaps I could come to you first off, Mr. Plevnev. What's your, from your perspective, what most excites you?
Thank you, Simon. Thank you so much. Well, there is no doubt we are living in interesting times, and history just happens in front of us. It's very clear that if we are very honest, we should say that if you just look back 3 years ago, nobody would predict that Russia will invade Ukraine. If you go back 2 years back in time, nobody would predict that millions of migrants will be just marching toward European borders in the very heart of European Union. If you just go back 1 year ago, a lot of people would not believe that Brexit is going to happen, but it happens, and this is history. And the very big question to me is not that history happens in front of our eyes, but the very big question is who is making history? Is it the President Trump, or the President Putin, or the President Erdogan? Who makes history? And if there is one question to me which is unquestionable, there is no doubt about that, and I can stand in front of you and say very clearly that there are people who are making history today in front of our eyes. Those are dreamers, those are entrepreneurs, Those are amazingly smart people, and those are those who run the new industrial revolution and really change the way we work, the way we live, the way we travel, the way we communicate, not in years, but in hours. Those people really make history. It's unbelievable if you look back 10 years ago where we were and where we are now, but it's even more unbelievable where will we be in 10 years in the future. For example, recently I talked to the vice president of Google responsible for quantum computing. Before that, I talked to HP and IBM people responsible for quantum computing. They're telling me they're investing heavily into this segment of the new industrial revolution coming, and they expect that 10 years down the road, a future smartphone will be having the whole computing power of the world today, just in one smartphone. So you can imagine what kind of application is going to be run and what unlimited horizon for new innovation is just coming. So to make it very clear, in the next 10 years, everything is going to change. The way we travel, the way we work, the way we learn, the way we communicate. Call it artificial intelligence, call it Internet of Things, call it quantum computing. It's coming, and it's coming very fast. And it is up. For me, I was not just a politician, a minister, a president, but I was also an entrepreneur. I'm an engineer, and it's up to me what is very exciting, but it's also very careful to be debated. And I'm so grateful that we're here, all of you today, and thinking about this. Yes, the world is going to change, and I have to be very honest with you. In this new industrial revolution, it's not the politics who leads. In this new industrial revolution, it's not the politicians who are taking the decisions. Politics today is just a follow-up, but it's not leading at all. Politics today can just register what happens in a very fast and dramatic speed. And politics today, in many areas, unfortunately, is not bringing solutions, but is more just registering and following up. So the very big question to me, and I'll be very honest with you, I don't know the answer yet. I'm so excited about the new industrial revolution, and I'm very, very much supporting, trying to give all the chances in my own country. We managed to agree with BMW, we managed to agree with HP, with IBM. We're doing a lot of things. We are getting opportunities, we're using those opportunities with the new industrial revolution. But I'm worried, and I'm worried and excited. Worried about 1.7 billion who will be unemployed 10 years down the road. Worried about 1/3 of the professions we know today which is not going to exist in 10 years. Worried if politicians 5 to 10 years down the road will address and find sustainable solutions for a new process, for a new industrial revolution that is going to question our ability as politicians, not as entrepreneurs, as politicians, to find sustainable solutions so that this process is going to be inclusive for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I come to you now, Pippa Malmgren? I mean, we just heard there about the pace of change and the speed of change, the great changes that are coming. Are there particular changes that you are particularly focused on that you think are going to pose these challenges for politicians and governments that people need to be thinking about?
So I do. As a manufacturer of robotics and artificial intelligence, I make commercial drones for commercial enterprises. What I find interesting is that people are only just beginning to process things that we already have, but it's what's coming that's much more interesting. So, for example, Elon Musk has recently created a company which is to do with neural lacing, which means we won't need a cell phone, a mobile phone, to interface with the internet. It will simply happen through your thought process. And while that sounds fantastic in science fiction, it's very clear that we're not far from it now. We're already at the point where you literally swallow a pill that is a robot, which can conduct a surgery from inside your eye. So the business of what is human versus what is robotics is also merging incredibly rapidly. But I have to step back from this and say, as an economist, what I see on the landscape is we're going to radically change the financial system that we have in order to accommodate this incredible change in computing power and capability. And I will go so far as to say that what will happen is we will abandon the system of money and accounting as we currently know it, and we will adopt an entirely new one. And this has happened before in history. It happened in 1834 in Britain when they abandoned the traditional tally stick system. You use the phrase, you tally things up, because they measured wealth and assets based on a board that you cracked in half that kept a record of every transaction in your life. And no one wanted to give these up in order to move to paper money, which they did not trust at that time. And they ended up burning the tally sticks to stop people from using them, which in fact is what caused the Houses of Parliament to burn down in 1834, because they misjudged how much heat it would throw off. Well, the equivalent of burning the tally sticks today is to move away from paper money and the traditional accounting systems that we have and move towards a new system, and we already know the name of it. Everybody knows the name of it. It's called blockchain. And electronic money can now be introduced literally in a matter of weeks, as we've seen in India, where they moved 1 billion people off of paper money onto electronic money with absolutely no warning and completed the entire task in about 6 weeks. So I personally see a dramatic change in how we do economics, where every activity in the economy is automatically recorded in the cloud. There won't be a need for a tax system. You will literally just deduct the tax at the point of transaction. So suddenly the whole notion of a black economy entirely disappears. It changes the way you finance innovation. But I'll go a step further and say it's going to have enormous implications for defense. And as a person who advises ministries of defense, one thing I see, which I find extraordinary, is that we have all these very sophisticated weapon systems that are about to become infinitely more sophisticated, much faster. And yet, we're incredibly vulnerable to any breakdown in electricity, sat-nav, Wi-Fi. I find it very interesting that the only military in the world that systematically trains without any access to electricity, sat-nav, Wi-Fi, or any other electronics are the Chinese. And I think we need to think about what vulnerabilities we build by becoming ever more dependent on highly, highly sophisticated systems. And finally, what it means for public policy making, timing. My father was the advisor to John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was in charge of the missile trajectories at that time. They had 10 days. In an era of hypersonic weapons, you don't have 10 days. So we have to think about the speed at which government, as you say, can innovate itself to keep up with what's happening on the technological front. You know, in my small world of manufacturing drones, I see companies saving as much as 30% from day one on their costs. This is a fraction of what is to come. So I'm extremely optimistic about what the fourth industrial revolution means. I'll say one last thing. I'll take the opposite side from you, sir, about the unemployed. I personally am, as a manufacturer of these things, I am very optimistic for employment in the future. I think that we should not delight in having human beings engaged in manual labor. We should free up human capital from having to do stupid things like lift heavy stuff and free it to do much more creative things. Now, will that require a change in how our education systems work? Absolutely. But guess what? It's already happened. I mean, we now can access lifetime education so easily. Millions of ways in which you can access the world's best teaching. So we are better equipped than ever to handle the transition from human beings doing manual labor to human beings doing much more innovative, creative things as a function of this incredible fourth industrial revolution.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to bring, at that point, bring Martina Larkin into the World Economic Forum. I think sort of invented this, the phrase the fourth industrial revolution. Maybe there were others will claim that you probably trademarked it, no doubt. But you know, it is a subject that the WEF has been discussing for some time. We've heard here now about various different risks. A bit of a dispute on the panel as to whether you know, whether mass unemployment is one of those risks. But what's your, how do you see the risks and the opportunities from the fourth industrial revolution?
So I would say, since, you know, as with all industrial revolutions or all revolutions, they have the huge potentials and usually rise, you know, global income levels, but also improved quality of life. And certainly we've seen this, and there's a huge potential around this. But at the same time, it also has the risk to really increase the inequalities. We already have seen rising inequalities across various continents, Europe also very specifically, and the US, of course. And this new revolution has the potential to widen this gap even further. I'm perhaps less optimistic about the outlook on the employment. I think we are about, you know, to see two different scenarios, and I'm not sure which one we will prevail. I think it will depend very much on how we will act in the next, you know, few years or months to get this on the right track and to ensure that we have the right future and we don't become sort of slaves of the technology of these developments, but really take it as an opportunity and really fully explore all the opportunities. Certainly we'll see a lot of long-term gains in efficiency and productivity, but it also will, you know, have huge demands on governments and other actors of society in terms of how do you enable and empower people? How do you deal with citizens that have access to much more information, that feel they want to be part of the decision-making process in a much more agile way? They want to be part of something that they have never had a chance to do before, and currently the systems are definitely not enabled to do that. There's no way that governments right now really can deal with citizens in such an agile way and have governance systems and regulatory frameworks that really deal with all these new technologies that were mentioned already and are on the horizon in an efficient and effective manner.
Yes, thank you. Maroš Šefčovič, sorry, beg your pardon. Oh, sorry, before I go on to the next, I was supposed to say it at the beginning, this session is being streamed live on Facebook, so just to be aware of that. Welcome to people on Facebook who are watching. Maroš, we've heard about a number of challenges, but what from the European Union has been looking at these issues. What can the European Union do to help societies, governments, countries prepare themselves for these changes that are coming?
I think what really needs to do in decision making and policy making is actually to reflect what, as we have already started the discussion on these two mega trends. The first is clearly industrial revolution. We are really in the midst of the process, which always led to the big changes. We started with the coal, steam, the locomotives, and the printed press, which suddenly brought the new information to the masses and the ability to travel and to produce more efficiently. Then, of course, later on, oil, cars, phone, TV, and now we are really in the process where we have energy, which I believe very soon will be abandoned, because we see how the price, especially for renewables, is dropping, which would be clean, which would be accessible. At the same time, we will have completely new ways of traveling. According to all our estimates, the number of people, the quantity of the goods we would transport around the globe would increase dramatically. And then, of course, if it comes to the communication, we see that there is something new every day. What is the difference between the previous two industrial revolutions and this one is the pace, is the acceleration. And I think we are now, if you look at the typical graph of which reminds talking about the sticks, not telesticks, but we are in Slovakia, so hockey stick. So we are somehow at this incremental breaking point, where I see it in our labs, that where we are going through the technological advancement, we are before it starts to go very, very fast in many areas, in energy, in mobility, in the communication, and also in the cities. And that brings me to this second mega trend, which is this hyper-urbanization. Every single day in the world, we have 180,000 people moving into the cities. In 2030, two-thirds of the mankind will live in the cities. In Europe, it's already the case. Of course, it brings a huge opportunities, you know, economies of scale, innovation environment, the quality of life. And at the same time, it brings enormous challenges. What to do with the air pollution, how to tackle congestions, how to manage the waste, what to do with the water treatment, and how to actually make the cities work in this new environment. So we see that this is really intertwined, and that these changes are so fast that we simply need to demonstrate new leadership. I believe that in this century, the key feature for the leadership would be innovation. Innovation would lead the way. I mean, even in a security perspective, in legislation, in policy making, and we simply have to think in the new terms when we prepare a new policy framework, where we legislate. How can we legislate in a way that this legislation would be future-proof? How can we keep up the pace with the change in a way that it would support the tendencies, create the necessary regulatory stability, which is so important for businesses and investors, and at the same time, not hamper the technological advancement. And this is what we are currently doing in the European Union when I'm responsible for two big projects. One is Energy Union, which is really kind of amalgamating all this change, what we want to achieve in energy, what we want to achieve with the mobility. In a couple of days, we are going to present a new big package, which would be called Clean, Competitive and Connected Mobility, because I do not want to have any Kodak moment in the European car industry, and simply we have to innovate, and we have to really support this dramatic change which is taking place in this industry. And we need to also provide these new tools to our mayors, whom I see as a new driving force behind these dramatic changes. Because the mayors are the first to address the issue of congestions, of the air pollution. They have to deal with the water management. They are responsible for waste. And I saw it in Paris when we've been discussing the climate change issues, that the negotiations been one very important thing, which brought us very good result. But for me, the most impressive been two other segments. The business leaders, clearly declaring that they recognize that this is a trend which requires long-term planning, and are going in that way. And then the mayors who really realize that big burden, and the burden will be becoming bigger and bigger, would be on them, on the local authorities, how to actually adjust their cities in these new tendencies. Maybe last example, why I believe it would be so fast and so quick, and it's very human. I was in Katowice a week ago, and I went there because I knew how sensitive all the policies or the decarbonization is for the people who are working in the coal mining sector. I wanted to talk to the social partners, to the representatives of miners, and to the local parliament. And of course, I was expecting quite lively discussion, as you can imagine. But what was very, very striking, and where I understood that this is something which would be really the driving force in the future, was the introductory remarks by the Marszałek, the speaker of the local Silesian parliament. He told me, we want to work with you because we don't want our young people to leave this region. Because they are leaving this region because they're worried if their kids would be healthy. They're worried because they don't know if they will find new jobs in the region. Help us to keep them here. I want our young talent people to live here in Poland, in Katowice, in this region, and we simply have to help them with the new business models. We have to introduce the new technology, and I totally agree with the president. We need to bring more inclusivity into this process, because we need to show the people opportunities, and not only, I would say, the adverse side, the worries, the concerns. And I'm also a little bit on a more optimistic note if it comes to the robotization. I think it's quite clear that all repetitive operations will be done by robots very soon. But I think the human emotions, sensitivity, care, creativity, all that what really make us different from any other being on this planet, it will stay with us, and it would be the quality which would be in a huge demand. And I believe that we need to focus, I would say, our future mission also the economic cycles in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come to Vasil Hudak now, but just to say, well, I want this to be as interactive as possible. So after he's finished talking, we become, well, you know, if anyone has questions, let's raise your hand or let me know. Please think about that while he's speaking. But Vasil, the EIB, as you mentioned earlier, has an important role to play in terms of helping fund pan-European investments or investments that can help with this transformation. But what are the key areas where the EIB is focusing? What are the main areas where the challenges that you see for Europe in terms of preparing itself for making itself better prepared for the fourth industrial revolution?
Yeah. I think we all spoke about the fact that for the industrial revolution and the changes we are facing, they basically mean a change for all of us. It also means a change for institutions like EIB, European Investment Bank, which is the bank of the European Union. We are actually the largest multilateral development institution in terms of the volume of money we put into economy. Last year we financed projects of over 84 billion euros. 10% of this actually goes beyond the European Union, and we are working very closely with the European Commission, European Parliament, people like Kata Meternova, who is here from the DG NEAR, to make sure that what we do is in line with the priorities of the European Union. But basically what it means for us is that, and I have been with the EIB for 6 months, so I'm relatively fresh in this institution, and I was before in commercial banking, so can compare the two different worlds. The bank has to change as well. It cannot be the machine for large infrastructural government-dominated projects anymore. It was kind of easy banking as I saw it. You know, give 200, 500 million euros here and there, and basically with a few projects a year, have a free time. It has to change. It has to be much more proactive. It has to go down to the level of, as Maros said, to the level of cities. We are now developing this joint concept of smart cities development, because these are the drivers of innovation, of the growth. These are the opportunities for the cohesion countries, as we call them here in this part of Europe, to leapfrog in their economic development. And also for the countries which are relatively small to be able to go beyond the barriers of economic development, of the geographic or other constraints. That's how we get countries like Estonia to be the leaders of e-government, to produce such companies as Skype with less than 2 million people population. So EIB has to change, and we are changing. We are also changing thanks to the new instruments such as Juncker Plan. This is a new, basically a new opportunity, financing opportunity for, especially for the innovations and for energy efficiency. We are implementing the projects which are eventually supposed to bring total investment over 300 billion euros by the end of 2018, and we should make European economy much more competitive. We are developing so-called advisory hubs, which are local advisory hubs in countries like Slovakia or Hungary or Bulgaria, to make sure that the local entrepreneurs have the ability to access funding from EIB. So it's not just a bank for the big governments. And what is very important for us is the additionality. We are a public bank institution, so we are supposed to crowd in private sector investment. We are supposed to take the risk in the areas where, for example, commercial banks are not going or not ready to go yet. We are also giving the private commercial banks opportunity to be more risky by, for example, giving them guarantees for them, some part of their portfolio to be able to go and lend more money to the small and medium enterprises. And we are additional in terms of bringing, I would say, broader horizontal type of development, so that smart cities can drive not only cities, but also smart villages. Because, for example, here in Slovakia, it's very important that villages don't get empty, that rural development gets as much attention as the urban development. And I think this is part of the role that public banks like EIB should have in the future, and we are moving in this direction.
Thank you. Just a a technical question for me there. I mean, we've heard a lot about the disruption that's coming in, and how difficult it is that the world is going to change so much in 5 or 10 years, and yet the EIB is investing in very long-term projects and trying to crowd in private investment. Are you seeing any reluctance from private investment to come in? Are you seeing people's, is there any evidence that the private sector is so worried about the speed of transformation that they can't invest, or are you unable to forecast forward? How's that? Can you just explain how the financial markets are seeing these issues?
Well, certainly there is, as was mentioned, any revolution brings a certain level of uncertainty, anxiety, and so on. And this fast speed of change also means that large corporations, whether it's in car industry, in steel production, metallurgy, kind of traditional large corporations are suddenly facing the fact that there are all these disruptive technology type of guys, whether it's Airbnb, whether it's Uber. I was amazed recently there was a data or information saying that Tesla car capitalization is now bigger than I think Ford car. Yeah, my goodness, I mean, who could imagine? A new, basically, recently startup is suddenly more capitalized than the old, stable, big manufacturing, car manufacturing. So yes, we are seeing some level of anxiety, some level of questioning in the capital markets whether long-term financing for certain type of companies, especially in the traditional areas, traditional sectors, is something which is safe. But this is exactly the area where EIB can be a partner, because we can provide this longevity. We can usually provide funding which is longer tenors of 15, 20, 25 years. And we can also provide support to, for example, to private equity investment funds, so that they can then deploy the money to the local partners and local beneficiaries. So I think this is actually a very interesting way where public bank, European Public Bank, can leverage private money and mitigate some of the risks that they see from the typical kind of private financial sector point of view.
If you allow me just to add one more aspect of it, because Vasil already described it very well. But what was also one of the driving moments when we came up with the idea of Juncker Investment Fund was the fact that we've been after the big economic crisis where Europe was heavily underinvested. And we see it on our infrastructure almost in all our member states, including Germany. I'm using the highways quite often, and I mean, you could clearly see that even there you need the investment in infrastructure. It's not only the infrastructure which is visible. You need much stronger infrastructure for the digital means of communication. And because of the limited possibilities for the public investment and public budgets, we ended up in a situation that we had actually lots of cash in the banks, very little possibility to fund many of these important projects from the public financing. And we need to find a way how we can actually bring more of this private money, of this private investment to support these transformational projects. And therefore, we came up with that idea, and I really would like to thank EIB for being so cooperative on this, that we will develop a little bit the business model in a way by showing the private sector that we as a EU, let's simplify it, we are going into this project together with you. We are ready to take the eventual first loss risk. You go with us, you can invest, and you could be as risk-free as you can be in this banking world, because such a respecting institution as the EIB is going to be a partner, and of course the Commission is going to assess the project as well. And I have to say that we didn't know how this would work, but I think average leverage is what now? 1 to 15 in the most of the projects?
Around 1 to 15, yeah.
Around 1 to 15. So for €1 of the public seed money, we get 15 euros from the private investors, and I think that's a great result, and I think that would be very much used in the future. And currently, I think thanks to this new scheme, I think we mobilized the investment of more than 190 billion in 2.5 years. So I think that's a very good scheme, and which I'm sure will be assessed how we can use something similar in the future.
One thing I find really fascinating is that you don't need very much money to do a lot of this innovation. I mean, I'm right in this robotics space, and it's not capital intensive. The fact that your iPhone has more computing power than was required to do the lunar mission to Mars means we're all empowered to do extraordinary things with actually not much cash. And that goes to solving some of the problems that matter for the strategic security world. I keep coming back to this because that's the main focus here. But as a small example, one of the things I see as an economist is the major driver behind China's One Belt, One Road strategy, a major driver behind Russia's Arc of Steel strategic security strategy has to do with their insecurity about access to food. But we live in a world where the MIT Media Lab has already created food production technology where you can literally grow any kind of produce you want in a container like you use on a container ship. And you can do it with virtually no electricity, definitely no sunlight, almost no water, almost no fertilizer or chemicals. And they're growing it 2 to 4 times faster than in the real environment with higher nutrition and, most importantly, better flavor. Now, when you have this already at your disposal, developed by students with no budget whatsoever, using open source technology, open coding systems, the application of this is extraordinary in terms of beginning to resolve the drive for access to food. And so I think this is another piece of this puzzle, is how do we operate in a world where actually almost anybody can join in this game. I mean, I look at this audience, you know, all of us are of a certain age. It probably is true that you have to ask the 14-year-old in your household how to use the technology you currently have. But the fact is, the 14-year-old does know how to use it. And there are people who are able to harness this extraordinary capability for actually not much cash. It brings a whole new meaning to financial needs for innovation.
Very quickly to build up on what my colleagues already said, it's about the private sector, and private sector is gearing up. They had such a huge opportunities with the new industrial revolution, and it's not just the German and the American or the Chinese companies, it is also here in Slovakia, but also in my country. We feel it, we sense it, it's there. It's a huge opportunity. I'm just giving some examples very quickly. For example, BMW is completely reshaping the way they produce their cars in a way that they do not understand themselves anymore as a car producer, but as a platform for mobility and a customized solutions for mobility. And we managed in Bulgaria to organize a BMW factories for the leather seats of BMW and Minis, where in the past you had just 3 types of leather seats for BMWs, a Recaro sport seat, whatever kind of seat. In the future, we have just 300. And all of them have to be customized. And this should not cost more money, but BMW becomes a platform for customized solutions. And it is the same, for example, in Adidas. I just recently visited one of their new factories. Adidas is completely reshaping all their factories. Their goal is just one thing. They want to produce your own shoe, deliver it home without this to cost any further dollar more than you thought it's cost today. So Adidas is a platform of personal and customized solutions on shoes. You go on their website, you design your shoe, you get your shoe in your colors, you design whatever you want. It is the same with the cars. And this is telling us that factories, and already 12,000 factories moved back to the United States. Obama, our colleague, was so proud when he was saying, I created during my mandate 8.5 million jobs in the United States because of the Industrial Revolution moving back to where? Close to customers. If you have to customize, you need to be close to the customers. We need to design their own customized products. And this is happening everywhere. And some of the industries to flourish and to come, call them traditional industries. But if the robots are going to produce more, people will be going more on vacation. So tourism industry is going to have a huge opportunity. The life industry is the biggest industry of the future, just picking up. It will be a global supermarket for consumer and customized solutions on life. And it is just the biggest industry in the future to come. Also linked to the new industrial revolution. So it is exactly my point that private sector is gearing up on an amazing speed, and we hope politics is going to bring regulations and solutions for this process to be inclusive and sustainable.
Good. Well, we should come back to this, the question of what good politicians can do and also what harm they can do in a second. But a question from the audience up here, please. Say who you are and listen.
Yeah, Milo Jones, IE Business School. This is a delightful discussion. I've been in Europe for 20 years. How many people here are in a country where Uber was opposed or is opposed? I think you need to remember, in the first industrial revolution, the franchise was very narrow. In the second industrial revolution, horses didn't get a vote about whether to be replaced by cars. Does anyone here feel that Europe might be in danger of becoming, for cultural or demographic reasons, might be in danger of becoming a sort of neo-Amish, backward-looking protectionist society? Or was I the only one in the first session that talked about the need for politicians to, in fact, shield and comfort populations from the changes that are coming? The automatic elevator was invented in 1900. The first automatic elevators were only introduced in the United States in 1945 after an elevator operator's strike. There's just an enormous disconnect between culture and technology. And could you address that, please?
Very good. I like that picture of the neo-Amish Europe. That's, I'll take that away. Yes, at the front here. Can we have a microphone at the front, please?
Katarina Maternova, European Commission.
So just say it again, because I know it's we picked up.
Katarina Maternova, European Commission, DG for Neighborhood and Enlargement countries. A little bit along the same lines, Maros, you mentioned at the beginning a hockey curve, right? I think that what you all described in a very, very lively and very enjoyable panel is something that the human brain is not capable of dealing with, which is exponentiality. And everything around us is linear, and it took thousands, many long time, many hundreds of years to get to the agricultural revolution, much shorter time to industrial, etc., etc. And now, in a span of 10 years, the human knowledge gets doubled. You were talking about inequality rising, and you talked about, and in this sense, the US is much more innovation-driven and much easier to capture what you were describing, but you also elected Donald Trump. So you suddenly, the mega trends come against politics and popular politics, and the fact that there are going to be the losers of the change, whether it's the old people, so Mr. Plevneliev, as a former president, hence a politician, what would be the 2-3 things that you think are urgently needed for politicians and policymakers, Maros also, to do to try to bring these trends together? Because I really see completely separate worlds developing. And how would you, if you were the president now, what would you be arguing for? And from a policymaker's perspective at the EU level.
Does anyone else have a question before we take these two great questions to the panel? Yes, please.
Peter Burian, I'm from EAS, from Brussels, dealing with Central Asia. And my question is about a big initiative. China is promoting Belt and Road Initiative. When I listen to you, I have a feeling that really in the future, probably in 10, 15 years, there won't be so much need for railways or this kind of huge infrastructure, because many things will be produced on the place close to customers. And my question is really how the European Union, you think, should deal with this kind of project, and how, what kind of focus on future connectivity should be the priority for us?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's just take these questions now. Maybe we could come to you first, Rosen, since there was one directly asked to you. I mean, I think this is an important issue, isn't it? How do politicians weigh the sort of short-term demands of populations versus what might be in their long-term interests?
Absolutely. Well, you asked about three things I would advise politicians to do. And the first and more important thing, I would advise them to engage, but really engage. If you want people to believe you, you need to be engaged. If you want people to trust you have a plan and to follow your plan, you need to really believe in your plan. And today in the European Union, we are exactly there. Do we have a plan for the future? Do we believe in our own plan, where we're heading into? And how do we make the others trust us that we have a plan and this is the right one? But the very first beginning of all those issues is be engaged. Really burn with the troubles, with the problems, with the perspectives. Get really involved. And not just because of Facebook and many other social platforms. Don't do it as a situation play. Because I'll be very honest with you, 95% of the politicians I know are situation players, but not strategic players anymore. For many of the media today, the day starts with the scenario for the day. But it's not a strategic horizon of where are we heading into. So if we could engage in a long-term vision, in a strategic plan that we really believe in and engage with it, the others will trust us, and we will be very, very strong in moving ahead. And also, once again, businesses are not sleeping. The businesses are moving very fast. They use the opportunities, and they do not just dream, but they really move ahead on their dreams, which is, I'm very much asking European politicians really today to come back dreaming again. What was our dream about having no borders, having sustainable peace? How do we achieve that? It's very simple to achieve it if you continue believing who you are and continue dreaming on this. But first of all, engage. And engage with the new industrial revolution. Not because of some, let's say, populistic or day-to-day businesses, but because we really need to engage with this. And after you engage, communicate so that you include everyone. And after engaging and communicating, I think it's what is important is educate. Politics, to me, is not about ratings, it's not about power. Politics is even not about being a strong leader. I'm a very strong leader. Politics is like the new businesses in the world to come, is a platform. A wise politician has to understand itself as a platform for the ideas of citizens to flourish. Wise politics is being a platform for progress, development, not just leading in your own way, hopefully with dependent media and propaganda machines. So platforms, create platforms as wise politicians, ideas, education, engagement in all parts of society within the new industrial revolution might bring a lot, because the new industrial revolution is also about healthcare, is about tourism, is about agriculture, is about everything. So everyone could be included if really we look at this process in this way. Speaking about China, with our Chinese friends here in the room, you're not coming from China? Okay, so I hope there was one prediction about the European Union. It's a nightmare for all of us that as we are burning into our own problems and dramas, and we're just passing the moment and the world is not waiting for us. One day we'll be just a beautiful and wonderful small part of the world for Chinese tourists to come in hundreds of millions and just enjoy, you know, for example, Venetia or the Louvre. Well, it is not our plan. We're very ambitious, we're moving in, and a big part of European companies are also pushing the fourth industrial revolution and even leading it. So this gap, as you were saying, between tech, which is innovated, and politics, regulation that comes in your elevators example, 14-something years later, nobody has this time anymore, and it's good that we have the European Commission here because the European Commission is an independent eye. The Germans have a very interesting approach. They call it the four eyes principle. You have something on a national state, but you have something above. And the European Commission, even nation state, is doing some wrong things, passing, sleeping, do not working. Well, the European Commission is just sending you nice letters. It's nice that we have this very good instrument of having 4 eyes on progress. And I'm sure, and I'm very optimistic that it's happening. And last thing about the Belt and Road Initiative, I truly believe that our Chinese friends, they're very smart. As we see, for example, an American president today who does not believe in the European integration process, who does not understand multilateralism and is not willing to support it. China is filling the gap big time in nanoseconds. They're extremely ambitious. And actually the Belt and Road Initiative is also linked to really regional development of China itself. The most undeveloped Chinese regions are going to flourish, not just the others on the way to the Belt and Road Initiative. So it's a very wise politics, and I think it's working well. And so we're all just trying to be part of this because we believe in free trade, and we believe in very good infrastructure as platform for free movement of goods, ideas, and new industries to come. Thank you.
Pippa, can I bring it to you? I'm very interested in whether you think the European politicians are in danger, or whether what harm they might do, and whether they're going to turn Europe into this
and maybe
museum.
you can elaborate on American as well.
You can certainly talk about America too. Exactly.
It's safer, I have to say.
Certainly too, yes.
Especially with this audience. So I think technology is profoundly shifting the balance of power between citizens and their states. And citizens are so much more empowered to build, to create, to build tomorrow's economy. The power of the state to tax and to regulate faces off the power of the citizen to innovate. And what I see is that governments, the biggest issue will be governments impede that process rather than encourage that process. And in our economies, industrial economies, emerging markets, 2/3 of the net new jobs in all economies are created by firms that employ less than 50 people. Almost all the innovation comes out of smaller companies. Even Apple says we're not a big company, we're a roof underneath which we have many 10-person shops. So this business of understanding what's the right balance of power between citizens and their state is a very profound issue for the fourth industrial revolution. I wrote a book last year, in fact, on this subject, arguing that what's happening today is we are renegotiating the social contract between citizens and their states in every part of the world. And the contract that you'll get in Europe or in parts of Europe will be very different from the one we have in the United States. It will be very different from the one you have in China, precisely to the point of the questioner from the back, that the cultural differences are profound and will be respected, in my opinion. That's why we don't end up with the same social contract in every location. But this also affects what is the magnitude of innovation in each place. And maybe one mistake we've already made is to assume that we should have, and you often hear politicians, even in America, talk about high-tech corridors, high-tech locations, high-tech cities. My opinion is we shouldn't have high-tech corridors or high-tech counties. We should have high-tech countries. We should have high technology throughout our economies and accessible by different parts of society. We should find ways to integrate people into that as opposed to trying to protect them from that. So as an entrepreneur, I have to say, to your point of you elected Donald Trump, my personal view is he is almost like an Uber phenomena in the political realm, in the sense that he is disrupting, disintermediating the traditional power structures. He is, whether he succeeds is a totally different thing. But the people who supported him, and I just gave 2 speeches in the United States for 1,000 people who all adore him. What they want is much smaller government that is not going to regulate, tax, and impede them in their effort to build tomorrow's economy. That's the social contract that America is leaning toward. My impression is that in Europe, the 39.5% youth unemployed in Italy are equally starting to say, this is a catastrophic loss of human capital that technology absolutely could put to work. And we need to find ways to renegotiate that social contract in Europe that will facilitate growth here. We shouldn't have a world where Silicon Valley is the tech place. We should have tech places all over, including all over Europe. But to do that, we have to have a state that doesn't so aggressively prevent businesses from being created and from innovating. So it's a balance of power issue, in my opinion.
Basil, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, sure. On this, I think very important question of basically whether Europe, as a protectionist, over-regulated enclave, is going to fall behind the other parts of the world. And I have to say, I'm siding with the President. I'm optimist, and I believe that Europe will be able to move forward. Of course, it will not be a linear process. It will have ups and downs. But I think that the pressure of people, at the end of the day, I believe that people have the wisdom collectively, that they will want to preserve some of the social elements of the European contract, and this will be able only if there is competitive economy and strong economy in Europe to be able to sustain such social welfare that we have. But one thing I want to mention is, which may be interesting in this context, this is and this is Brexit. And I think that Brexit, very much unpleasant situation for Europe. Obviously, and any divorce is unpleasant. But if UK wants to show, and I think that any UK government will want to show that outside of the EU we do better than inside the EU. And I think there'll be pressure on the EU to show exactly the opposite, that we are able to be better and more competitive, etc., even without the UK, that this will actually create very interesting dynamism, because in a way UK will be a mirror for the EU without the UK. Because I think the new government will go towards deregulation, it will go towards breaking up some of these, as you mentioned, some of these old traditional regulatory political structures, and etc. And I think this will create a challenge for the EU without the UK to show that actually we can be competitive, we can also change ourselves, and we can transform into something which would be lighter, more competitive, much more dynamic, much more attuned to the needs of the technological revolution. So, however unhappy I am about the Brexit and so on, I think that there might be some interesting positive elements of this.
Can I come to Martina and I come back to you, Maroš, because before you can then answer on behalf of the European Union the various criticisms we leveled. But Martina, how do you see the role of government in this
Well,
process?
we certainly are seeing that governments are facing increasing pressures to changing their approach, to become more agile, to really be more inclusive. They're also being given much more powers. Technology will empower them also. They will give them power to survey, to do more surveillance, to own the sort of digital infrastructure, the data. All of these questions, of course, will empower governments also to a certain extent. At the same time, of course, citizens will be enabled and will also have higher demands. I believe that governments will, do understand right now, and all these discussions here and around the world show that governments are concerned. They are acting to a large extent. They're also willing to cooperate much more with the business sector, with civil society, with youth. They listen, they want to involve youth. Youth is a big driver also for some of these activities. So we're seeing certainly that there's much more dynamism, I would say, in the government sector. We just also created this new center in San Francisco on the fourth industrial revolution to help governments actually to navigate these new governance frameworks and regulatory frameworks, to try and develop these jointly on a global level. So not that France has to deal with Uber and Airbnb, and then the UK deals with it and China deals with it in a different way, but that we can have some sort of global framework for many of these new technologies that responds to the needs of the future of the citizens. So I would say, cautiously optimistic in a way, but we certainly see a much higher response and much more positive response from governments around the world to be an active player and future-oriented in this space.
Great. I want to come back to the audience in a minute if anyone's got some more questions. But Maroš,
I mean, just a few quick words. I mean, on the nature the transport and this Chinese big project. I think the transport will really go through the huge transformation, not only because of Uber, car sharing systems, driverless car, but also because of the 3D printing. I remember very well when I was at Hanover Messe how the German Chancellor was proud, as Mr. President just said, that Adidas is coming back to Germany because they are going to offer 100% customized service, and on top of it, the shoes should be manufactured somewhere in Asia because they'll be 3D printed in Germany. And when I talked to the mayor of Rotterdam, they're already now thinking how this huge port business case would be affected. Because for sure in the future, they will be probably importing different goods than now, because most of the small spare parts or the pieces of the technologies or equipment would again be 3D printed directly, I would say, on the plant site or closer to the consumer. So I mean, this is something which is already happening, and of course will affect also such a big plants like One Belt, One Road. Because we are here, I would say, in such a good combination between the Europeans and Americans. We had also in this conference quite a few discussions about the trade between EU and United States. And I'm a strong advocate of having such ambitious agreement. And I have to say that was not the voice which was coming from Europe, which put this very much on hold. I hope we can really revive it, because I believe that it will open really new opportunities, not only for the economic development and increase of trade, but also for what I would demonstrate as a global projection of the free and fair trade to the world, for better respect of labor codes, for better respect for the environment. That simply we would be able, as more than 50% of the global trade, that, I mean, if you produce your T-shirts in some kind of poisonous water by enslaved children or women, they're not going to buy it from you. Or if you're going to destroy half of the city because you're producing some jeans, we don't want that. And I think this is something which we could do as a two big economies, and to be very strong on social inclusion, on dumping, how we simply measure what's happening. And I think it's very important for the future, because now we are in the situation, definitely here in Europe, that if we do not protect, this was the word which was probably they used the most frequently in the French presidential election, and it will be the same for the parliamentary elections. So then we can, in a matter of months, lose complete sectors of our industry. So what we would do? We need to plea for free and fair trade, for social inclusions, for clear rules, and also for strong understanding what that means. And I think that would be something which would very much determine how the people would also see this globalization trend in the future. Because currently, I have to say, those who are well-placed, well-educated, and have good jobs, they like it. They can travel, they have huge choice of goods, and they have plenty of opportunities on the labor market. But there is a lot of people who are venting their angers through this election result in the United States and across the Europe, because they are subconsciously worried what this would mean for me. Now I am in the global market. Will I lose my job? What will be the new business case for my city, for my town? I mean, that was one of the mobilizing factors in the United States. I mean, that's the issue which we have in Italy, where you have the best educated young generations since centuries, but unfortunately in the wrong sectors. And we need to work together with the young people, with the students' counselor, with the parents, and to tell them that, you know, lycée is a great thing. But maybe if your son or daughter is able to do something else, they can even earn more money, and they would be happier than struggling at the universities and studying the subject where you will have very difficult to get the job afterwards. So it would require a lot of honesty, stronger guidance of what would be better for the young people to study. And I think with the situation which we have with the youth in Europe, we clearly need to invest massively in reskilling, in re-education, and to really do it in a very systematic way, because we know what will be the skills of this century. We know what we need to know, and I think our young generation is already pointing to what might be needed, because they're already better than we are. But we need to shift that huge, I would say, machineries in our member states to change the education, to reskill the teachers, to involve more companies into that process, so that people would be leaving the secondary school, the universities would be definitely much better prepared than they are right now, less frustrated, and really voting for the future and not for attempts to protect something which is gone, which would never come back, and for which their parents especially had the nice memories.
Thank you. We had a question here.
Well, yes, thank you. My name is Shivani, and I'm at Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. And before first of all, a beautiful segue into my question is what you just said about people skills and the future of people skills. But before I ask my question, I really want to applaud you for a totally new take on the Trump phenomenon, because it's a totally outside-the-box situation which suddenly found an outside-the-box response, and nobody knows what to do with it. But you need an outside-the-box approach to it. I just want to say that at our university, which is one of the preeminent universities in the United States, our engineering school is really struggling to figure out what it is going to be teaching, not in 10 years' time, not in 5 years' time, in 2 years' time, a year's time, because everything is changing. And I just want to have your take on it. You touched upon a lot of things. I think you're right. Our university is at the forefront of figuring out health and all that. But I want to ask you, you didn't touch upon the future of teaching, education. And kind of, Maros, you touched upon it a little bit, but I'd like you to elaborate on that. Maybe, Felipe, you have an interesting take on it. I'm a European living in Washington today. I have to say that we in America are a little bit ahead, but I will stop here.
Behind you. Any other, yes, a question over here. Right. Any more? Show of hands. No? Right. Yes.
Thank you. Benedict Müller, working for BAE Systems. To bring this whole thing back to security a little bit more, we talked about renegotiating the social contract, and earlier Estonia was mentioned as being at the forefront of e-government. I think for a lot of young people, when renegotiating the social contract, you don't really feel like we're sitting on the negotiation table for a lot of citizens. Do you think that investment into more digital inclusion of the society could be something that could be driven on a local, national, and also international level?
Thank you. Any more? We got anyone else? Right. Well, we're coming towards the end now anyway. So let's. Should we take? Well, start with Pippa. Yeah, sorry.
Because I love this question.
Yeah.
And I actually think the Europeans, but I actually think the Europeans have a huge advantage here. Because as a manufacturer of drones, right, you would think I go out and I hire people who know how to make them. No one teaches how to make drones in engineering schools because they're so new. Until there's a textbook, then there's no class. And what I find is that I try to hire these world-class engineers. They are brilliant at math. They cannot solder metal together. They have never handled physical things. So I have a very strong view on this, which is if we had more of the German-style education system we used to call the gymnasium system, where you have to learn your literature and your opera, but you equally have to learn a practical physical skill. And we should treat people with those skill sets with equal respect to those who have a white-collar, college-led path. If we did that in the United States, our innovation would be much higher, because so much of the innovation actually doesn't come from the classroom learning. It comes from playing with things in a workshop. That is where, and I'm at the cutting edge of this, and I'm finding I am often hiring kids who have very little education, but they're great at modeling. They've spent their whole teenage years playing with stuff, putting it together. So I actually think, in this one respect, the European emphasis on practical apprenticeships is very wise. And we would see far more innovation in our economies. I'll finish with this. I wrote a piece on this for Wired magazine. Everybody forgets Einstein's uncles ran a repair shop. And as a kid, he was in there all the time, and they'd throw him the broken toaster, the broken radio, and said, hey, kid, fix that. And his awareness of physics, I'm sure, was influenced by that practical experience. So that's another thing that makes me hugely optimistic about the ability to include people in the economy that we currently exclude because we say they're not educated. That's because of the skill sets we're emphasizing. Just one last thing on your digital inclusion. As an economist, what I see is governments, how do they collect data about the condition of the economy? How does the Federal Reserve collect it? You know, pieces of paper. This is ridiculous. We should have a digital approach to our knowledge of the economy. Every time a new business registers, it's a digital process. Bang, it tells you about the pace of new job creation or new business openings. Right now, we got a lag of like 9 months. This is insane in a modern economy. So the business of digitizing does give voice, I do think. One good thing about the populist movement, the election of Trump, the event of Brexit, is that every young person I know, every 20-year-old, every 18-year-old, they come up to me and say, hey, on Friday night, could we come hang out with you and talk about politics? I'm like, excellent. Now we got kids who are interested in politics. And so I think they will come into this and have more of a voice as a result.
Basil, you wanted to comment? Yes.
Just briefly on this point that Filipa brought, which is the importance of technical skills in this new world. And actually, when I was in the Slovak government, this was something which was heavily discussed. And it was at that time when a strategy of so-called dual education was adopted, which basically means that those students who are in the secondary schools should spend some time in the companies to get these technical skills. And the idea is to promote cooperation, close cooperation between secondary educational institutions and companies. And there were some also incentives introduced. What might be interesting is that some of us remember the socialist times, that this actually existed during the socialist regime, because it was all socialist educational system with state-owned industries, and they did have this exchange. But I think that educational reform is a key component of the change, especially in this region. And I think the President would agree. I see it in all countries of Central Europe. Of course, it's about what to teach, but it's also about who to teach. I mean, we need to create incentives for high-quality teachers to go to schools and to teach these new subjects and bring the new skills to the students. And unfortunately, currently, we don't have this. So this is, I think, a huge challenge that we have in all countries of Central Europe.
Great. Well, we're coming towards the end, so I'm just going to ask the speakers want to come in, just if they also have any, as well as answering these the questions from also any final thoughts. But perhaps I could go to Martina next. Yeah?
So maybe also on the point of the education piece, we do quite a bit of work. We work with many of the top universities across the world, and it's certainly one of the next big areas that will be disrupted in a major way. You know, the traditional way of 4 or 8 years of education, I think, to begin with, which used to be sort of the job you keep for 8 years and you go to school for 8 to 4 years, whatever, will be completely transformed, I believe, and you know, many of our research areas show that. The aspect that you always have to have this teacher-student relationship, and you can't learn from each other or learn from other aspects, or, you know, diversify completely, also have multiple tracks at the same time, like the gig economy where you have different jobs at the same time. All of these things, I think, will come up and will really transform the education system entirely, and we don't even know yet how to do that. In terms of, you know, what we see as successful, certainly the apprenticeship model works quite well, but also really, you know, driving much more of the soft skills also that were mentioned before, and collaboration and creative thinking and problem solving, not necessarily like math or, you know, that sort of finance or accounting, which will be done in the future by robots or by sort of artificial intelligence, machine learning thing. I would say that that's kind of like, from our perspective, something very, very important to keep an eye on and help us at the universities really revolutionize their own systems and their own institutions for this fourth industrial revolution.
So let's go, Maros, would you like to come in with some thoughts?
Just to sum up on the education, I think it's rather symbolic, and I think it's a good conclusion, because that would be the key how we would manage these new mega trends, how we would be preparing the new generation for the completely, it's a new way how we would live in this century, and what would be the best combination. I will totally agree with you that these technical skills are very important, and they somehow disappeared from our school systems over the last decade. Now we are trying laboriously to bring them back, and to increase the interest of the young people, that inquisitiveness, that I would say playfulness, what the technical work give to you, so we can also better decide what you want to do in the future. At the same time, I think as a father of a son who is trying to complete the secondary school, just these moments, and I'm checking my messages all the time. Also, I think what is very important to somehow explain to the children that not everything is on the Google. That, Daddy, why do I have to learn, the date and the name? I can find it. I thought, no, you don't, because if you do not know the context, if you never heard that Napoleon existed, you could hardly, find him on Google. You just have to have the basic understanding of the history, how the world works, what is the democracy about, so you can orient yourself better, and what I found very, very important. Third thing I would say, this was about the inclusion of the people using the electronic means for that. I think that all our democratic systems are currently overwhelmed by the pace of politics, by the news cycle, and by that viral possibilities which can destroy the politician in a second, which can set completely on the agenda from the night to the morning, and from the fact that the people now are living in kind of information bubbles, that thanks to the filters, they are getting the information which they like. They're listening to the statements they prefer. They talk to the people with whom they sympathize, and somehow they tend to forget that there is also another group, and there is another view on this or that point, and that's the nature of democracy, that always the best solutions, the best decisions been always generated by the good discussion. I think we need to find a way how to do that, how to balance that information flow, and that would be very important. I was in Vilnius yesterday. There is new progressive mayor, and I see that we have here the advisor of Bratislava mayor, and he's very much talking to his citizens through the emails. And I asked him, aren't you overwhelmed by all the input, by all the competition? Yes, we are. We had to hire more people, because if you do not respond within a week or two, if you do not see that there is the practical consequence of your statement or of your input, so then you wouldn't believe in it. Then you would lose the interest. So it must be done in a way that not only the means and platform is creating, but also responsiveness is there. You have to feel that you make a change. And I saw one particular app which I very much like, and I promise that I will pass this on to the mayor of Bratislava. The mayor of Vilnius introduced a new app. If you see a pothole, you can make a picture, you send it to the mayor, it must be fixed within 2 weeks. So, and everybody can check if it's true or not. And he told me that they are already behind the schedule. I think in Bratislava, we would need a little bit more lead-in time for that. But it's something what the people like to do, because they're then included into the process, how to make the city more livable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raj. Yes, Rosen, your concluding thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. If you look, for example, at Switzerland, there is very interesting statistics. Switzerland is the country with the lowest unemployment rate in Europe, but also Switzerland is the country with the lowest youth unemployment rate in Europe. There is almost no young man and girl in Switzerland that is unemployed. If you look at the European Union, the statistic in the European Union, then you will have 5 countries on one side of the table and all the others on the other side of the table. And those 5 countries who have very low unemployment rates, who have very low youth unemployment rates in the European Union, are countries like Germany, like Austria, Denmark. I don't know about Slovakia, but I could add just 2, 3 of them. The Netherlands, definitely. And those countries are exactly those who have the so-called Dualausbildungssystem, so the apprenticeship programs. We in my country are also trying to address this, as we know if we don't do this, we are passing the new industrial revolution. Factories are not going to come if you do not have a human capital that is part of the investment process. So it's something to learn here in Europe, and the results are obviously seen. But what do you teach children in the future? I would try to teach them the right approach. If business is going to become a platform, if governments are going to become platforms for ideas and projects to develop, we need to teach them the right approach. And here I come back to my worries from the beginning. President Trump, all young people in the United States voted for him. Marine Le Pen, all young people in France voted for her. And I'm coming to a major point for me where I see a lot of danger, not learned lessons from history. We can teach them whatever you want, but if we're not learning from history, history repeats big time. Protectionism, okay, we've seen that in the 20th century, big time. As a result of this, there was a war. And now we have a new protectionist American president. What are we learning from history? The new American president is saying, I want to strike deals. But to be president is everything but not striking deals. President is a moral compass of a nation. A president is a visionary, a leader. So just to make the point clear, because I'm also an engineer and I'm looking for solutions, there is no solution to any of the world problems we have today on bilateral. And if we have now an American president who is saying, I'm going to do bilateral deals, but just show to me one problem, terrorism, migration, new industrial revolution, just one, free trade, that could be solved on bilateral. We need multilateral solutions. And international platforms, United Nations, European Union, a major platform for peace and development in Europe, and everyone has to use those platforms so that his ideas could flourish. So I want to thank you once again by hoping that we will be having the right approach on history and on future. Thank you.
Thank you. You began by saying who's going to make history, and you ended by saying we should learn from history. I think that's a good point upon which to end. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank the panel for a fascinating discussion. The next session here is on cybersecurity and critical infrastructure. That will start here after a short break at 10 to 5, 16:50, and there are refreshments in the hotel. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thanks to the panel.
Okay.